Investigation into the Trump campaign's dealings with Russia made some big moves this week. On Monday, it was announced that former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his protege Rick Gates had been indicted and that foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos had pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Where will this lead? Joining me again is Preet, Bharara, and the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Michael Hayden, the former director of both the CIA and the NSA. Preet, let me start with you. And for all my viewers, you're getting the correct pronunciation here, Bharara, aspirated H.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have my name pronounced correctly.
Tell me about Manafort, because a lot of people, including the President of the United States, say this has nothing to do with collusion. This is, money laundering was a while ago. Is Robert Mueller doing this as a way to squeeze Manafort to get him to be more cooperative on issues of collusion?
I think the first thing to remember is that Robert Mueller is a prosecutor's prosecutor. He's a professional. He's been doing this for a long time. And in the same way that we used to do it in our office, the first thing that you do is you hold people accountable for crimes that they commit. And if there's evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that you can prove to a unanimous jury, like they believe they can here on these money laundering and other charges, they bring it. Now, a consequence of that can be, if there are other charges they want to bring against someone else, then maybe Paul Manafort will, in the parlance that we use in law enforcement, flip and cooperate with the government. Now, sometimes that happens even before a charge is brought, like it looks like happened with the other individual charged last week, George Papadopoulos. Prosecutors and investigators will make an approach, will say, we have good evidence against you. They probably did that with Paul Manafort and with George Papadopoulos. In the case of George Papadopoulos, he said okay and he cooperated. Paul Manafort, he did not. Sometimes, though, after people's minds get focused because a criminal charge is brought to bear on them, they have to retain counsel, they go to court, they're confronted with the enormity of what is facing them, meaning the loss of their liberty, they sometimes slip then.
You think there's a good chance Manafort will go to jail?
I mean, look, I don't know all the evidence that the special counsel's office has, but they're pretty straightforward charges that you can prove without many witnesses. You can do it through the documents and through the financial records, and some of the charges I think are very clear. It's not, a lifetime in prison, but it's a substantial prison sentence. And I expect that Paul Manafort and his lawyers are talking about the idea of cooperating with Bob Mueller. They may never do it. Some people do it, some people don't. And it may be the case that he doesn't have significant things to say that are worth the time on the part of the special counsel's office. But I think all of those things are still in play, and we haven't heard the end of it.
If the president pardons Papadopoulos or Manafort, is that obstruction of justice?
I think that's an open question. I think it's certainly a terrible thing for the rule of law. It's a terrible thing for what law and order is supposed to be about, and it sends a terrible message to every prosecutor in the country who's trying to do his or her job without fear or favor and in a neutral way. I also think that regardless of whether or not it's provable obstruction, and there's an argument that it could be depending on the surrounding circumstances, that then becomes something that Congress can think about with respect to impeachment. I'm not saying it is impeachable, but for Congress to take action, for the House of Representatives to take action, they don't have to show that every element of a particular statute was met in order to vote for articles of impeachment.
Mike Hayden, you say that the tragedy here is that whether or not there's collusion, there's been kind of a lot of stupidity in the way in which, or in the way in which the president has handled this, welcoming the WikiLeaks, stuff and things like that.
No, exactly, Fareed. In fact, perhaps all help that the Russians needed was the president to do what he did during the campaign with regard to highlighting WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks, and using WikiLeaks as a campaign tool. But to come back to what